Imagine a people who rose from nothing, kicked down and marginalized, yet they turned their scattered bands into some of the most feared warriors the world has ever seen. Riders on horseback, bows in hand, striking with lightning speed and ruthless precision. They didn't just fight, they dominated. And here's the twist. Centuries apart, oceans apart, two completely different civilizations share almost identical ways of waging war. Am I talking about the Mongols or the Comanche? Stick with me. By the end of this video, you're going to see just how eerily similar they were, and why history has never seen anything quite like them. Before we continue, if epic warriors and untold history are your thing, subscribe now, because what you're about to discover will change how you see cavalry warfare forever. Hundreds of years ago, on the vast, unforgiving grasslands of Eurasia, a man named Genghis Khan united scattered nomadic tribes. Through brutal conflict and cunning strategy, he forged the largest contiguous empire in human history. Now, fast forward 5 centuries to North America. The Comanche, once an obscure tribe, suddenly became the most powerful force on the Great Plains. How did they do it? Horses, bows, mobility, and a culture built around warfare. Every time I talk about the Comanche, people say they remind them of the Mongols, and honestly, they're not wrong. From the terrain they conquered to the way they fought, the parallels are almost eerie. But let's slow down. What made these societies so formidable? How did two completely separate cultures develop such similar ways of life? We'll explore all of that, but first, I have a question for you. If you were living in a world where your survival depended on your horse and your bow, could you thrive? Could you dominate? All right, let's start with the landscape. The Mongolian steppes and the American Great Plains may be thousands of miles apart, but when it comes to shaping horse-mounted warriors, they might as well be twins. Harsh climates, endless grasslands, few trees, perfect for horses, but unforgiving for humans. Next, we'll ride across these lands and see how geography didn't just shape survival, it shaped war itself. What happens next will change how you imagine horse archers forever. Close your eyes and picture this. Endless plains stretching as far as the eye can see. No forests, no mountains, just rolling grass and sky that feels bigger than the world itself. The wind blows hard, and winters bite deep, and summers scorch everything that doesn't move fast enough. Now, imagine surviving here. And not just surviving, but thriving. How? Horses. For the Mongols of the Eurasian steppes and the Comanche of the American Great Plains, horses weren't just animals. They were lifelines, status symbols, and weapons all rolled into one. Without them, neither society would have existed in the form we know today. Think about it. In an environment where water is scarce, trees are rare, and building materials are almost non-existent, how do you house your people? You move with the seasons. You take your homes with you. For the Mongols, it was the yurt, a round portable tent, expertly designed to shelter families and their animals. For the Comanche, the teepee served the same purpose, easy to dismantle, quick to move, perfectly suited to a nomadic life. And here's a detail you might not have considered. The women were in charge of this. While the men trained, raided, and fought, the women moved the homes, the supplies, and often the livestock. It was a full partnership. One side could not exist without the other. Now, let's talk about horses themselves. They weren't the massive stallions you might imagine from movies. No, they were smaller, rugged, and incredibly tough. Mongolian horses could survive freezing winters with minimal resources. Comanche Mustangs roamed the plains with endurance that left European cavalry struggling to keep pace. And here's the kicker. Both cultures lived, ate, and breathed around these animals. Owning horses was a sign of wealth. The more you had, the higher your status. And every warrior on the move could switch mounts during a raid or battle, covering distances that would seem impossible to outsiders. Picture a Mongol raiding party or a Comanche war party. They could disappear over the horizon, strike, and return before their enemies even realized they were gone. They didn't just fight on horseback. They became extensions of their horses. Without these animals, none of it would be possible. But geography didn't just shape their homes and horses. It shaped the very tactics they used in war. Open plains allowed them to see enemies from miles away, but also made hiding nearly impossible. That meant speed, cunning, and mobility weren't optional. They were survival. So here's a question for you. If you had to live on land like this, constantly moving, constantly under threat, would you adapt? Could you become a master of survival? A horse archer capable of outsmarting forces 10 times your size? Because that's exactly what the Mongols and Comanche did. And it all started with geography shaping not just where they lived, but who they became. But surviving isn't the same as conquering. And conquering requires one thing above all: deadly skill in combat. Now imagine standing on the edge of the plains, the wind whipping past you, when suddenly a storm of arrows descends from the horizon. But these aren't just any arrows. They're fired by riders who can hit moving targets while galloping at full speed. These weren't soldiers wielding swords or muskets. They were masters of the bow, born and raised to fight on horseback, and they were almost impossible to stop. The Mongols used composite bows, crafted from layers of horn, sinew, and wood, designed to store incredible power. Draw weights could reach over 160 pounds, a strength even most trained archers today would struggle to pull. Every Mongol warrior spent years conditioning themselves from childhood, shooting from horseback before they could walk confidently. Meanwhile, the Comanche wielded bows made from Osage orange, smaller, yes, but still highly effective. Their draw weight averaged around 50 pounds, enough to bring down buffalo and deer with precision. Comanche archers were so skilled that George Catlin, an American artist and eyewitness, wrote about them in awe. On their feet they were awkward and clumsy, but once mounted they seemed reborn, almost untouchable. And he wasn't exaggerating. These warriors could fire arrows while hanging off the side of their horse, leaning backward, or shooting under the horse's neck. Every movement was choreographed, precise, and lethal. But it wasn't just the bows that made them formidable, it was how they fought. Both the Mongols and Comanche perfected the feigned retreat, a maneuver designed to trick the enemy into overextending. Here's how it worked. They'd engage, then suddenly retreat, making the enemy think they were winning. Excited, the enemy would give chase, only to find arrows raining down from every direction. As the enemy pursued, they'd be funneled into ambushes, surrounded and overwhelmed. This tactic relied on speed, discipline, and nerves of steel. If even one unit broke formation, the plan could fail. Yet for centuries, both cultures executed it with devastating effectiveness. And here's something to think about. Horses weren't just mobility tools, they were survival. One Mongol commander is said to have expressed, "If the horse dies, I die. If it lives, I survive." Switching mounts mid-battle, firing arrows while galloping, disappearing over the horizon. These warriors weren't just skilled. They were the embodiment of their environment, their weapons, and their culture. The Mongols organized their armies with precision, units of 10, hundreds, and thousands. Every warrior knew his role. Promotions were based on merit, not birth. Discipline was strict. Failure carried severe consequences. The Comanche, smaller in number, had no formal hierarchy, relying on individual skill and collective speed instead. Here's a question for you. If you were facing these riders in open plains, arrows whistling past your ears, could you even hope to hit one? Could you survive a day under their relentless speed and precision? It's easy to underestimate them. On foot, yes, they might look ordinary. But once mounted, they became forces of nature. And it wasn't just skill, it was culture. Children learned to ride almost as soon as they could walk. They learned to shoot almost as soon as they could hold a bow. By adulthood, they were unstoppable. And it wasn't only about the battlefield. These tactics influenced entire societies. Both cultures were built for warfare, from childhood training to adult campaigns. Every raid, every maneuver, every arrow fired had a purpose, not just to fight, but to ensure survival and dominance. So the next time you see a horse galloping across a plain, imagine what it could do in the hands of a Mongol or a Comanche warrior. It wasn't just speed. It was mastery delivered with precision, skill, and a culture that revered the bow above all else. But skill alone doesn't explain why they were feared. There's another side to these warriors, a darker, more ruthless side. Skill and speed can win battles, but dominance? That requires something more. It requires fear. And for both the Mongols and the Comanche, fear was as much a weapon as the bow. Let's talk about raiding. These weren't just hit-and-run attacks. They were carefully calculated campaigns designed to take what the warriors needed: horses, resources, and sometimes captives. For the Comanche, raiding was survival. The Great Plains could feed only so many. Scarce bison herds, limited water. If you weren't the predator, you were the prey. Every raid gave status. Every successful attack increased wealth. And in every failed raid was a harsh lesson. The Mongols operated on a scale that few societies could comprehend. Genghis Khan unleashed campaigns that stretched across continents, reshaping entire empires. Yet the principle was the same. Strike hard, take what you need, and send a message no enemy could ignore. But let's be honest, there's a darker reality here. Both cultures employed tactics that could be extraordinarily harsh. The Comanche, according to historical accounts, used psychological warfare against their enemies. Captives sometimes faced severe treatment as warnings to others who might challenge them. Author T.R. Fehrenbach writes of Comanche raids. Spanish records describe how the Comanche used fear as a weapon, showing the harsh realities of plains warfare. It's difficult to comprehend by modern standards, but in their society, this approach was normalized. Courage was measured by endurance and resolve, not just the willingness to fight. To the Comanche, intimidation was a tool of survival and social dominance. The Mongols were no strangers to harsh tactics either, though their approach was often more systematic. Cities were given opportunities to surrender. Those who resisted faced organized sieges and overwhelming force. But it followed military protocol. Their methods were calculated, efficient, and designed to end resistance quickly. There were even cultural practices guiding their methods. The Mongols observed certain protocols around different classes of enemies. Their approach wasn't random. It was strategic, ritualized, and, in a complex way, structured within their worldview. And this brings us to society itself. Both cultures were built around warfare, but in very different ways. Mongols had hierarchies, merit-based advancement, and units structured for extended campaigns and sieges. Comanche society was smaller but equally focused. Warriors were central, raids were central, and survival depended on loyalty, skill, and cunning. And it wasn't only men. Women held crucial roles, moving homes, managing supplies, and keeping society functioning while the men were away on raids or campaigns. These weren't passive roles. They were essential to survival. Here's a question to consider. In a world like this, where life depends on mobility, skill, and courage, would you survive? Could you exist in a society where tactical thinking, cunning, and speed were the keys to power? It's easy to romanticize these warriors on horseback. But remember, they lived in harsh worlds, shaped by unforgiving environments, scarce resources, and the constant threat of rival tribes or invading forces. Every raid, every arrow, every strategic choice was a response to a world that demanded excellence, or extinction. And yet, despite all their similarities, these two cultures were separated by continents and centuries. They would never meet. But if they had, history as we know it might have been very different. So, let's ask the impossible question. What if the Mongols and Comanche had met on the battlefield? Two of history's most formidable horse archer cultures, separated by continents and centuries, suddenly facing each other. Who would win? Let's break it down. First, numbers. At the peak of Genghis Khan's power, then the Mongol army numbered around 130,000 soldiers. That's more than 10 times the estimated total population of the Comanche in the 1800s. Even if the Comanche had every warrior at their disposal, they would have been vastly outnumbered. But let's imagine a hypothetical battle with equal forces. One-on-one. What would it look like? Both cultures relied on horses and bows. Both mastered feigned retreats, and both could strike with devastating precision. Comanche warriors excelled at raiding in their familiar plains, striking quickly and vanishing without a trace. Mongols were experts at extended campaigns, sieges, and coordinated attacks across massive distances. And then there's armor. Mongols wore layered leather, hardened lamellar armor, and sometimes chainmail. It wasn't perfect, but it gave them protection against arrows and close combat. The Comanche relied on buffalo hide shields and minimal armor, which provided mobility but left them more exposed in direct engagements. Tactics would be critical. Comanche war parties were bold, intimidating, and psychologically overwhelming. They relied on speed, surprise, and the sheer terror of a mounted raid. Mongols, however, were disciplined, organized, and methodical. They coordinated units, used scouts to anticipate enemy movements, and executed maneuvers like feigned retreats on a scale that could encompass entire armies. Weapons tipped the scales further. Comanche bows were highly effective, but Mongol composite bows had greater range and power, capable of piercing armor and hitting targets at distances the Comanche bows could not reach. On horseback, and this advantage in range could decide the first volley, and often, the first volley decided the battle. Even in stealth or guerrilla-style engagements, the Mongols were skilled in reconnaissance, ambush, and deception. Their campaigns were carefully planned and supported by logistics that the Comanche simply could not match. So, who would win? Most historians would likely say the Mongols would have significant advantages, despite the incredible skill and bravery of the Comanche. And yet it's fascinating to imagine. Two cultures so alike in spirit, separated by oceans and centuries, meeting on the plains for the first and only time. Here's a question for you. Could any force in history match either of these cultures in their prime? Could Alexander's Macedonians survive the Mongol horde? Could Roman legions withstand Comanche raiding tactics on the Great Plains? History is full of what-ifs, but these two stand out because they mastered mobility, skill, and psychological warfare like no others. And that brings us to legacy. The Mongols reshaped Eurasia, facilitating trade, cultural exchange, and even religious tolerance, though their methods were often harsh. The Comanche controlled the southern plains for generations, their mastery of the horse unmatched, their name striking fear in settlers, armies, and rival tribes alike. Both cultures struggled when technology and modern firearms changed the rules of warfare. Horses could no longer guarantee survival, and numbers alone began to matter more. Yet for centuries, anyone on the edges of their worlds knew the same thing. The name of the Mongol or the Comanche meant respect, fear, and legends that would echo through time. And here's a thought to leave you with. History often celebrates kings, generals, and empires. But sometimes the true legends are the ones who mastered the land, the horse, and the bow. The ones who turned survival into dominance. The ones who made history tremble, not with grand speeches, but with arrows and speed. So the next time you imagine a cavalry charge across a vast open plain, think beyond Europe. Think of the Mongols. Think of the Comanche. And remember, in the right hands, a horse and a bow can change the course of history. Thanks for riding along with me through history. If this story fascinated you, consider subscribing. There are countless warriors, cultures, and battles still waiting to be explored on this channel. And here's a question for you. If you could witness history firsthand, which warriors would you want to see in action? The Mongols, the Comanche, or another legendary force entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's keep the conversation alive.